Thank you. I want to apologize for Mr. Pricks not being able to make it. He sent his warmest apologies. He had another meeting that wasn't possible. So for once, I get to come and play, and he has to work. So it's a different change, but it works. So this is the European Central Bank in Frankfurt. This is just to give you kind of an overview of the overall composition. The building in front is an existing market hall built in 1928. The entrance building is projecting in the front, and then you have twin towers behind, and then the atrium in the middle, which I'll get to in a second. So just to give you a little history about this project, started in 2003. We had 80 participants in the competition. It was an invited competition. Then we went to phase 2 with 12 participants. Then the revision phase of 3, and then optimization phase, then preliminary design phase, and then the detailed design phase in 2007. Then another optimization phase after that. So this has been a process over a few years. Then construction started in 2008 and finished in 2014. And this is a sketch from Mr. Pricks about the project. The first rectangle you see is the Grossmarkthalle, the market hall. And then we have the 2 towers. And the connection between the 2 towers, which is an atrium, which kind of constitutes the city within a city. And then there's an entrance piece that intersects the Grossmarkthalle, also becomes a connection between the tower, the city, and the existing building. Within the Grossmarkthalle, we have a convention space, semi-public space, and it's kind of oriented in the diagonal pattern. And the most important, or the first step in this process for us was to think about the ECB as a symbol of Europe and a symbol of cooperation, a symbol of importance, not only for Germany, but all of Europe. And we felt that to give this building such significance, we needed to create a new geometry to do this. And so basically on the left-hand side, you see a block, and this is if we take all the mass, all the function, one block, and then we cut this with an HP cut, curved through that block. We did this for a couple of reasons. One reason is the daylighting requirement in Germany is a lot higher than it is in the US, so you have to have light within 15 feet of the facade, or else you can't have a workspace there, basically. And so we made this cut through the block. You open up the block, and then we basically flipped that piece around, and we created a central atrium. And this is kind of the main concept of this city within a city, is we're taking a traditional office block, we're splitting it apart, creating different levels within this block, and these will become like city centers, basically, or public squares. And this is going to be an interaction place, so you don't have these kind of dark corridor elevator lobbies anymore. We're opening that up and creating this kind of public space for interaction in between these 2 towers. And this is just a video of basically what we did. So it's a very simple concept to start with, but as you see, it will get a little more complex. And this is the site. You can see the site is a little bit distant from the center of Frankfurt with the financial district there. You can see the Grossmarkthalle on the right. And so this is what we ended up with at the end. And you can see it's a building that's transparent with this atrium, but still has a strong presence. And with the geometry of the HP surface on both sides, it opens up views across the city. And so this is kind of a section. You can kind of see the platforms that create this vertical city. These are the different atriums. And so basically, from a circulation point of view, you enter this existing building, becomes kind of a public foyer, an urban foyer, and then you basically take shuttle elevators to each level of each platform. And then from that, you take localized elevators to your spot, and this creates this kind of public interaction at these platforms. This is what the platforms look like. This becomes like an intimate meeting space, a socializing space. You can see the projections on the left of the boxes. These are meeting spaces that also look in. And then on the left-hand side, you can see the elevator entrances. So you always have people that are within this space together. This is a programming diagram of the makeup of the project. And so the red is kind of the secured office area. The Grossmarkthalle below is the convention space. The entrance building that's projecting through is a press conference space at the top. And you have all your IT services in the bottom of the Grossmarkthalle. And some figures, 120,000 square meters is the site area. The gross floor area, 185,000. It's about 220 meters with the mast. 185 meters for the 45-floor section of the tower, and then the other tower is 165. We have about 2,300 workspaces and an auditorium for 1,400 people. This is how fast I wish it was built, but it took a little bit longer. And this is a shot from the city center looking back. These are some finished pictures. You can see that also in the landscape, the problem with the ECB project is they want it to be very transparent and open, but the security requirements are incredible, right? And so instead of building walls around the site, we use landscaping to give them this kind of security that they needed. And we'll see later in the development of the facade of how the security became such an issue. Overall shots. And now you can see the city center in the back. Now this is going towards the atrium in the middle. You can see the twisting of the towers on each side. And notice the scale of the neighborhood around and how the Grossmarkthalle is kind of a little bit, it's at that scale. We move the tower kind of towards the river to try to keep some of the context around relative. And so from some views, it's very slender and thin and elegant. And then the other views, it's more heavy and strong. So if you look at this is the center of Frankfurt, the financial area with all the high rises, and then we're kind of out on the eastern end of the city. And so we're trying to create a city within a city somehow, but at a distant point. And when you're creating different nodes in the city, then you have these areas of tension, and this becomes development at the end. Some views of the construction. So if you look at the scale of the other Frankfurt high-rises in comparison to our building's not the tallest for sure. But with the geometry, it's one of the strongest. And also the fact that it's away from everything else also contributes to its success. And the orientation of the high-rise itself and then the atriums is focused towards the city, so that you always have this kind of view back to the skyline of Frankfurt. And we oriented the building so even in, we get northern sun also on the facade of the building. We use the atrium space is not a fully conditioned space, it's an outside space technically. And so it's naturally ventilated, and then it's supplemented with radiant heat in winter, of course. Then we use also the prevailing winds and then pulling air out of the building in different areas. We use recycled heat from the computer center, and we transfer that back in to heat the tower of the building. We also have geothermal loops in the foundations that go down to the bedrock of the soil. You can see here we have radiant ceilings. We use a sophisticated facade that I'll get into later to block out a lot of the sun. And this is just a different winter, summer conditions. In summer, the ceiling, it's a radiant ceiling. You can use it for cooling or for heating, depending what's necessary. Structural concept. Originally, we have these two thin towers, and we had kind of a flying buttress kind of system between, or that was the initial idea. What it ended up being was more of a vertical bridge. So you have two slabs of reinforced concrete and then a steel truss structure coming in. And then the platforms also are part of that structure, of course. See a little more detail, but this you can also see the cantilevering of the structure off to one side with the HP surfaces on both sides. Some photos during construction. This is really, you can see the platform in the middle, and these are becoming these kind of urban centers or streets or squares within the high-rise. Bringing, the typical high-rise is just the podium, and then you don't really have a view or anything. We're trying to stack this on top of each other to try to create new spaces within the city. And so with the twisting of the facade, we have a 13.5 meter cantilever from the bottom to the top. You can see this, the column on the right is coming away from the building and starting that cantilever. The Grossmarkthalle, this is the existing building built in 1928. It was damaged during the war and also used for other things during the war that are not so popular. But it's a historic building, and we had to go to the authorities and try to get a different, we tried to get them to cut out the center section, because the center section was an area that was rebuilt after the war that is not original. So they allowed us to build this entrance piece, this entrance building. And this is the inside of the Grossmarkthalle, where the main conference spaces of the building are. And then the connection here to the high rises. And so we use the proportions of the Grossmarkthalle to start the direction and the proportions of our building. It's the entrance into the high rises. This is one of the atriums from below. And this is a very successful place for kind of informal meetings in the bank. People are using all these platforms for that purpose. This is the view you have from some of these platforms. Yeah, our energy is 30% below the German energy benchmark. We use a triple glazed facade. We have natural ventilation within the building. We have highly efficient sun shading. Only 10% of the heat gets in from the atrium. And we use recycled heat, as I said before, and geothermal energy for cooling. Now we're getting towards the facade. This is a triple layer facade, so the area to the left is the interior, and this is your regular insulated glass, and we have a sealed facade that has louvers inside for solar control. And the outer layer is where we have our solar coating, reflective coating, but also for the ECB, it has bulletproof coating. And then you can see by the ventilation slot, we have a small opening at the facade, and then this grows, so it also decelerates the speed of the air coming in, and then it's automatically controlled to give natural ventilation to all the offices. And you can see it's every other bay. We have a natural ventilation slot, and the other slot is used for the cleaning equipment for the facade. some close-ups of the facade. It's a ventilation slot. Now you can kind of see the sweeping of the HP surface. 90% of all these panels are exactly the same. And supply air, exhaust air. This is just different ventilation simulations. Some shots from the outside of the facade installation. So this is riding the elevator up through the atrium. You're hitting different levels, but it gives you an idea of the experience of this or a typical high-rise when you're entering and your experience in the building. This is the top floor where we have where the decision makers do it all for the ECB. Also with bulletproof glass in case somebody has a helicopter, apparently. It's a map of Europe that is the ceiling. Some of the atrium during construction. Yeah, the existing gross martale and the construction of the entrance piece. So we kept the old structure, put new windows in, more insulation, created a box within a box so that this area is also not fully conditioned. And that's it. Thank you.